Hi everyone, this is Jenny and I'm going to do a layout for my last reveal for the blog that I'm a DT member of. It's Color Me Scrappy, and this is the challenge number 48, and there is a color palette challenge obviously, and their other part of the challenge is to use feathers, and this is the I'm sorry, it may be small, but this is the color palette is based on this rooster, and it's got nice fall colors of sort of a deep teal and ochre, kind of a light kind of corally red, and a maroon, a blue, and I'm not sure whether this is like a deep navy or a kind of charcoal gray or black. I'm sort of kind of trying to figure that out. So that is the color palette, and the challenge part of it is to use feathers. So I've pulled some things that I thought I might use. I had actually planned something else for this, but those colors are so fallish that I really thought it would be better with a different photograph. So because of the feathers and everything in the photograph I chose, which I'll find, I kind of decided that it would be good to have like my theme would sort of be, or my title would be Spread Your Wings and Fly, or Find Your Wings and Fly, and kind of along those lines. I love that set, that the collection that My Mind's Eye came out with, that I think is Find Your Wings and Fly. So this is actually an old photograph of my daughter that we took when we were at a park, and they had this big sort of climbing rock, and she'd climbed to the top of it, and my husband did sort of a neat little Instagram filter thing on it, and she was the queen of the world. And anyway, so I just put it into black and white so I could use lots of fun colors. So I kind of thought that was a neat photograph to do for this sort of theme. And so kind of along those lines, I thought it might be neat to have a lot of maps and sort of the idea of her finding her wings and flying away, even though that won't happen for hopefully 9 years. So this is an old piece of paper. It's from a Kaiser Craft pad I have that I love. It's all travel based. So I thought about using that as a background behind the sort of maybe a white or cream piece I use. And then from that same collection, I thought these might be neat. Some of these tickets I might cut out. And this is, I believe this is crepe paper. I'd used a piece of it before, and these colors all seem to very similar to that. The only thing is I didn't really want too much of this distress look, since it was a black and white. I kind of felt it was a little more crisp, and this has got that more distressed look, but I may use a piece of that, we'll see. And this is a piece of the Dear Lizzie Fifth and Frolic that I love and have left over, and that's that sort of fuchsia pinkish color. And also from the Dear Lizzie, this is the Lucky Charm. I love this paper. I had 2 or 3 pieces of it, and I don't know if I've ever even used this side of it. I've used this a lot in pieces, and that's kind of what I was looking for, was that blue and that same sort of green in the same way. But I do like that side. That might be better if I go for this sort of more distressed kind of look from that matte print. Might be better with that, and if I go more with that, it might be crisper. I thought that might be sort of along those lines of the that sort of yellowy color, and I thought that would be good because of the little homes and hearts and sort of fly away home. This is a piece of the, I believe it's the new crepe paper Maggie Holmes flea market. It's the little sort of mini album pad that I usually just take apart, and I thought that was neat, and I may tuck my journaling into that or just use that as a backdrop, but those colors were perfect, and I thought it was neat that it was an airmail letter. And I've got some little gold dots, a stamp set, some twine, and a few different little die cuts from the Silhouette and from that same crepe paper line. A couple of these, if I did go with that more distressed look, I thought about using this, one of these filters that I still can't seem to decide whether I like or not, but we'll see. So that's a maybe, and some letter stickers and thickers. And I had this just sort of distressing set. This may be Tim Holtz. It may not be. But I thought about stamping first on these feathers that I had cut out for the feather portion. And I've cut them out. I've done it multiple times. This is watercolor paper. Some of them are just plain white cardstock. And then I have these feather tags from Jenni that the colors don't really go, but I thought I might flip them over and just use the back side and then either stamp those or watercolor them to kind of go with that same color scheme. And then I got a little flare badge with a map on it to go with that. These are from that same crepe paper Maggie Holmes that are pretty right on colors if I decided that was navy. And then I've just got white and cream cardstock. So that is where I'm going to start, and I'm going to go ahead and probably decide what I'm going to do with the feathers first and decide whether I'm going to paint them and get started with the layout, and I will come back and talk through a little bit of it in a bit.
Alrighty, I thought I would talk through the majority of this video since I got so much wonderful feedback. Thanks to everybody for that. You may be sorry, but I'm going to talk through this video and then we'll see how everybody feels about that. I am just getting together the papers that I thought I had planned on using and trying to figure out how I was going to layer this up. I had kind of been unsure about that distressed map paper, but I decided after looking at it that I really thought it should just be more of the sort of crisper look and not that distressed coloring, even though I did distress a few things. I always seem to have a hard time trying to figure out whether I want to do the sort of white or an off-white or ivory tone with some of the base papers I use. I don't mind mixing them at all, but I have several different sort of base papers I like American Crafts and Basil Basics, but I do not, one of those, I think it is I cannot remember, I think it might be the Basil Basics, it's not an ivory, it's a very yellowy vanilla, and I do not like it. I can't remember which one it is, but this is the one that's better. It's just a little bit off-white. And I kind of like the white. I think it still pops the picture out, and that doesn't bother me. So I don't mind mixing it, but I do need to find a really good sort of not super white, but not too yellow off-white, if anybody knows of any. So I'm going to try to layer all of those things out on that airmail envelope that was part of the crepe paper mini book. I wanted to maybe use that for some journaling, but in the end I really just liked it as a frame for the whole thing, and I decided to leave it whole. I'm just trying to match up some colors there, and ironically I don't feel like I really did a great job on the color matching. I think I got often more of the tangent of the sort of teals and hot pinks and that brownish color, but I decided to take these these die cut feathers that I used. I die cut on my silhouette and I stamped them with this text stamp and some StazOn, and then I used some more distressing ink to distress them. And that was part of my feathers. I had a feather stamp and I had some other real feathers, but I kind of thought this would be a neat way to add my title, so that's what I had decided in the end. I used that big map piece that I had thought on the back, and then I've tried to use a little bit of that postage punch just kind of for the whole travel-ish theme. So I cut out a couple of those little pieces from that other paper, those tickets, and I had layered those up together. And then I love those flowers, and I'm sort of on this kick of trying to blend in watercolors with the background and with different elements, so that's what I use that for. So I had picked out a different twine that was much more gray, sort of the light blue color, and I decided to go for this darker navy. I decided to go for navy for that dark color, even though I think it's maybe more of a sort of between navy and black. I'm not quite sure, but that's what I decided it would be. So that's where all of the sort of navy blue comes from. So I'm going to cut a piece of that off, and then I use another little piece of that, the leftover little bit of that postage punch part, to just to tie that back in, and it's a nice little scrap, so tie that color back in. So I'm going to distress those die cut feathers now. One of those is actually I didn't use any of the Jenni Bolin feathers in the end, the other die cuts. They were a little bit too big, so I decided to I use the 4 of those are just regular white cardstock, and one of them is a watercolor paper that I had kind of planned on trying to do a little bit differently. I ended up just using the same ink as it turned out, but it does take it just a teeny bit different, and I did stamp it with a different color ink. I stamped it with a purple StazOn instead of the brown. So then I distressed the edges in that tea dye distress ink from Tim Holtz, and then I used another chalk ink that's a sort of the pink color, and did try to do a gradation with more of the pink on that last one feather that's a little bit different. And then I misted this geotag in gold, and this little piece of a leftover something. I have a big bucket of leftover die cuts and bits and pieces from things I've cut on the silhouette, and it's amazing how sometimes those are the pieces that become more used, or they become more important than pieces that I actually deliberately cut, which I kind of guess is the whole theory behind scrapbooking, I suppose. So I'm going to adhere that just a little bit off center so you can see a little bit more of the map. And then I put a little piece of this hot pink paper from Dear Lizzie at the bottom, just to add that in. And as usual, I pretty much always put my photos on pop dots, or a piece of the photo or the mat. That little paint strip is from the crepe paper. It's the new flea market line from Maggie Holmes, and it's one of the die cut packs, which I think is awesome. I've been using paint strips and paint sample strips like that for a while because I love that sort of ombre effect, and it's a great thing to add when you need something that matches the color but you don't have it, or you don't want to add too much more pattern. So there's there's one of that blue color, and there's another one, I believe it's the hot pink. So anyway, I used that blue one, and those are the feathers. I decided to flip it and make it on the right. And I'm going to use these little letter stickers from Glitz to spell out my title, which I decided would be Find Your Wings and Fly. And I know that's the same title for the My Mind's Eye collection, which I didn't use any My Mind's Eye on this, I believe, but I still do love the name of the collection, and obviously it went with the feathers and all. And then I thought I might do, to make that other one at the bottom stand out a little bit more, I was going to have it like they were sort of all tilting off the main sort of mat of photos, and sort of cluster of pictures and papers and everything, and that one would have a different stickers or different letters. I hadn't decided quite yet what I was going to do there. So that's another one of those crepe paper filter vellum pieces, acetate pieces that I still can't seem to cover up. Mostly, like I said before, because this is a filtered Instagram already. So, but I like it behind it. It's a nice contrast, and it sort of looks like it was a little bit of that distressed coloring bit. So I had a little neat piece of flair from the Paper Bakery that's a map on it. It's kind of hard to see here, but that's what I used around that bottom floral cluster, and I'm just sort of putting bits and pieces in there. This is the twine I decided to use instead of the lighter blue or sort of grayish blue. This is American Crafts. I just sort of rolled it around that envelope, and then decided I would tuck the feathers up underneath it. I ended up using a stapler to staple them to that. So I'm going to finally kind of put all of that together. And as far as layering goes, I just kind of put things together until I really like the way it looks. I don't, there's a part of me that hates sort of losing a lot of the patterns and a lot of the paper. I feel like it's a waste sometimes losing, even some things like half of that little die cut paint strip piece that I would normally keep. But I really feel like I do have a lot, and way too much, so sometimes I use it like that. If it's something I'm feeling really particularly hoarding and stingy about, I'll actually cut it, or sometimes I've cut out the back of the sort of base paper like that if it was that matte paper, but I had 2 pieces of that, so I wasn't too worried about it. I started to go ahead and put that my picture down, and then I decided to wait because I thought I was going to do some of this watercoloring around those flowers, and I didn't want the picture to get wet or get in the way, so I decided to go ahead and adhere that whole cluster down. Sorry about my head. And sometimes I go ahead and glue everything down, but usually I'll do basically what you saw me do, which is to make a big cluster all by itself and then decide where I'm going to put it, either on the paper, or that way, if that's usually all sort of temporary adhesive or things that are just stapled on or barely put together, so that if I change my mind, which happens a lot, I can peel it off without too much trouble, and then I'll adhere the whole thing down with my ATG or something much more permanent. So those are the little die cuts from the same crepe paper line, the flowers, and I'm going to glue those down in both of those corners, and once I get the feathers on, then I begin to paint on there. The feathers were a little bit higher because of the twine and things, and I couldn't quite get them to sit flat, and the page was warped a little bit, so I just put some Tombow Mono glue on there and then weighted it down with some of my little heavy bowls and things until it kind of set. So this is my favorite thing to do lately, which may get old because I seem to do it a lot, but I really I love just trying to match some of these watercolors and tie in the paper and give it a little bit more sort of artsy look without doing too much. And if I do it light enough and without too much water, it doesn't warp as much. So I got all that on there, and here I'm just mixing the color, and I'm dabbing it a good bit with the paper towel, or it might be a baby wipe actually. And then sometimes when it's wet, that's the good time to go in and just add some of the straight paint, and then it disperses really nicely. I mean, that's one of the nice things about watercolor, and one of the things I think is great that you can't really mess it up. I've messed up a lot of things before, but none of them with watercolor that I didn't feel like you could go back and fix it, or go back and change it a bit, or add water and dilute it, or obviously you could always cover it up. And watercolor is nice because if you want those big drops like that, I just load up my brush and then kind of squish out my fingers and make a big drop. And if it's too dark, you can just dab it a little bit and pull up some of the paint, which I did there at the bottom. So I believe that's it for the paint, and then I go ahead and adhere my picture. I hadn't planned on using one of those resin flowers, but I decided it matched, and it was nice. I needed a little bit more sort of dimension and texture up at the top side because I had a lot of it on the bottom side. I'm going to dry that off just a bit with my heat tool, and then I write the date on one of those little tags. And instead of doing a whole lot of journaling, I ended up just writing a little bit about where we were on one of the pieces of pattern paper. And I've got those little glue sort of dots that are glitter. They're SEI, I believe, and they're great. They don't shed a lot of the glitter, and they're just like enamel dots, and they look like stickles, but they're not messy. They don't take a long time to dry. So, and then I found this alphabet from Jelly Bean Soup, and I used that for the last piece of that title to kind of. The only thing I kind of wish I had done was to not make. I kind of felt like the Find Your Wings and Fly it should have been going up instead of down. I mean, I kind of like the way it looks as far as the composition, but in terms of the fact that she's sort of holding her hands up and you're saying fly, and you think more like up, and instead I'm going down. But you know, that's just an afterthought. So here's my little bit of journaling, and that is it. Here are some of the close-ups and the final product at the end. I so much appreciate all the feedback that everyone has given me, and I would love more. So hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you for the next video. Thanks so much. Bye.